So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. You might not all recognize Søren Kragh-Jacobsen, but I'm pretty sure that everyone has seen one of his films who grew up in Iceland, from Semismuginavle, which was taught here in Danish lessons in the early 80s, to Gumi Tarsan, and also as founder of the Dogma movement. And finally Borgen, which is one of the most popular TV series here today. But it didn't all go according to plan, though. Originally you wanted to be a blacksmith. How did you wind up here?
It's actually true. When I was 15, my father decided that I was going to be a blacksmith. And you know, I'm a family with a lot of brothers, and not being the oldest, then you didn't have the opportunity to study. So actually I went to be an apprentice in a larger company. And I spent 5 years there. But the most important thing for me was that the first thing I bought for not my first salary, because it was very low, but it was to buy a Super 8 camera, because I always dreamed of making films. And I watched films every time I've had the opportunity to do it, double programs at Sundays, and so forth and so on. So I made films during these 5 years, and I envy every young people today that you can buy a camera, and you can actually buy a little device, and then you have 4 hours, because at that time you had to buy a Super 8 film, and that costed a lot of money, and it was 3 minutes. So you learned how to keep things tight, not use too much footage, really think about what you were going to do. But nevertheless, when I was finished, when I was in the beginning of my 20s, I didn't have any doubt that I wanted to do documentaries about the working people. I was very red in these days, and I managed to get into the documentary line in Prague, in the film school FAMO in 1969, and I was probably the only communist in Prague at that time. That changed, but that was actually my film school for 2 years, and I never dreamed of going into the feature film business. And to do it very short, I was very lucky to be employed at the Denmark's radio, so to speak. You know, we just had one channel, and I was in the youth department, and I was actually employed there until 1981, and that became more or less my film school. I was a film producer there, and I was a host in several television programs, and then I happened to be so lucky that I was actually writing songs. And I made some records, and some of them became very popular. And one of the songs was called Mona, 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 which is a song I'm, not to knock myself too much on the back, but it's a song most every Danes know that song. It's the ultimate song when you sit around a campfire. And I've been doing some films with an author called Hans Hansen, and the story is actually about a school class, going on a weekend or a week to a house outside in the countryside. And it's a love story between a boy and a girl. And he wrote a book called You Wanna See My Beautiful Navel, Min smukke navle, min søde navle, eller hvad det hedder, ja. And at that time in Danish film, there was what we called the youth wave. The new generation of filmmakers in Denmark in the 70s discovered that the audience, the very young audience, there wasn't made any special film for them. So this story of Hans Hansen was very potential for doing a youth film. And they had other directors, because I was not very much involved with the film business. But he said, you know, I'm working with a young director on television, and I'm sure he should direct this film because I'm very inspired of his song. So that's why I, back in 1976, was suddenly standing in the Danish film business, doing my first feature film. You Want to See My Beautiful Navel. And for me, it was something very, very new. And it was, of course, with a lot of amateurs. You didn't have much time. We had a month to find these 20 young people who was going to play this the part. But it was obvious to me that I wanted to cross some boundaries in that sense, that everything that had been done for young people was very, very, very innocent. There was no kissing, no want to see my beautiful navel stuff. And I decided to do it more or less documentary. A lot of it is shot handheld. I wanted to give it a bit more pace. And unfortunately, what happened after 4 weeks of shooting was that the company became bankruptcy. And it was like this. You're standing in the Swedish nature with 20 young amateurs, which mostly of them have never acted before. And I found Liselotte Rau, who was going to play the female part, the love interest. And I found a young guy who, I looked and looked over this month to find the right one to be the guy. Because I could relate very much to that, the first immature attempts, the way into love. And I couldn't find this guy, and then I started to search all schools in Denmark. And there was a night school where you could learn about extra German or something like that. And there was a young guy standing there, and I said, he looks right. And I asked him if he wanted to test film with me. And he said he wasn't very keen on that. But I forced him more or less, come and test film with me. His name was Birger Larsen. And he was very good. He was full of music, and he had brown eyes, and he was definitely, a kind of guy that young girls liked. So, I forced him more or less to do the part, and he was very difficult. And he was definitely not in love with the one he should act together with in the film. So I've postponed all these love scenes. And when the company went bankruptcy after 4 weeks, we had to close all the takes. And she was like brown, suntanned, and he was not that tall. And suddenly I was standing there with a film where the only engine in that film, a film needs an engine. Something that actually makes the movie run. And the only engine in this film is, do Klaus get Lene? And do Lene get Klaus? That's what a love story is about. And I didn't have the end for that film. So we went home, and I couldn't see any possibilities to finance the last part of it. And it actually took me 10 months because I started to edit whatever I had of footage, And I managed to get 20,000 kroner out of the Danish Film Institute. And then I, have to go back in Sweden for 3 days to finish my first feature film. And then I remember picking up Birger Larsen, and he was at least 20 centimeters taller. And she was not brown anymore. And we went up and we made what you're going to see now. And it's actually done, sometimes something is done in the winter time. Because it was supposed to be a summer film, And when we rolled into Sweden with a little crew, there was a half-meter snow. So this sequence I'm going to show now is, sometimes you can see a bit of green leaves. Sometimes a lot of it is made in a barn up there, in another boat, with Birger Larsen getting taller. And nobody have ever noticed. And I shouldn't actually tell you before, and I don't think you will notice, but that's what the magic about film is. And that's the first sequence I want to show you, is from You Want to See My Beautiful Navel, shot actually with 10 months in between. And just to end this story, Birger Larsen, the troublemaker on my film, actually became my assistant later on, and became a very successful film director. And do you have the crime up here, Forbrydelsen? And he was the concept director on Forbrydelsen, and I've been on a lot of television series since then. And he's a great musician too. So he's a very close friend of mine. Now he's 52. But I think we should see the first sequence.
How many went to primary school in Iceland? Did anyone have this on his curriculum still? Who did? Yeah. Everyone was did in my day, you know, this was part of the school curriculum.
I have to mention one thing, because I've been here on Iceland very, very many times, nearly with all my films, and that's due to Mr. Fridbert Poulsson, who's sitting there, if you want to raise up your hand, Fridbert. Fridbert invited me up with You Want to See My Beautiful Navel, or it was Gummitarsen, and you actually bought Gummitarsen, Fridbert. And you actually made it into something that people have to write about in schools. He's really in charge of it, I can tell you. And you know, I've been, and Fridbert is the reason that I have a very close relationship to Iceland. Thank you. But let's see the clip.
Ej, hvor er det godt, den ligger endnu.
Det er sgu godt, de ikke er taget årene.
Skal vi ikke give den et navn?
Et navn? Hvad for et navn?
Jeg døber dig, Mathilde, den første af svær.
Du er med ved tosset.
Synes du?
Nej.
For så suser mit hjerte derind.
Kommer du ikke? Giver du et kys? Du smager sød, du er.
For some reason, every Swedish person I've ever met has seen The Raven Flies by Hrafn Gunnlaugsson, and if they see an Icelandic person, they always see Tungur Knívur, and that somehow got into the Swedish education system, like this film got into the Icelandic education system. I'm sad we don't have a catchphrase, but this is about children going to Sweden where they discover love, sex. There was also another film which is not by you called Sappa, which was on a similar theme. So they always go to Sweden to experience these things. And your newest film also starts with a man going to Sweden, but to kill people. He knocks on a door in the middle of the night, which is a good argument against letting a Dane into your house in the middle of the night if you're living in Sweden. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about the relationship between Denmark and Sweden, as in your films. His latest film is also a Danish-Swedish co-production.
I think in the old days, back in the 70s, it was like this, that Swedish film directors, Swedish films, were very admired by the rest of the Scandinavian countries. We were extremely influenced by, of course, Bergman. Personally, I was a Bo Widerberg man. I mean, I thought I happen to like Bergman's film a lot, but Widerberg's film hit me much harder. I'm sure you've seen a lot of it. You've seen the riot in the A Valley and Elvira Madigan, and Bo Widerberg made a lot of films. And it was, when I went into the film business, it was like this, that we didn't count Norway in as a film country. Iceland didn't exist. We'd never seen an Icelandic film. We admired the Swedish films. The Finnish films we didn't understand, but we saw them now and then. And we wanted to be as good as these guys. And we really admired Swedish actors. The Swedish actors, we found them much more believable in what they were doing. We were very much out of a theatrical situation. And Copenhagen, where the film business in Denmark is located, is very, very close to Sweden. Now we have a bridge, it takes 20 minutes to get to Sweden. And it's very, very exotic compared to our country. Me personally, I have a house in a lot of people, Danish people have houses in Sweden. I have a house very nearby where we shot this film, because there was more than 1 million people who actually left their houses at the beginning of the 19th century. So there was loads of empty houses, and you could get a house for nothing. And I happened to be so lucky in 1972 that I, together with 4 friends, bought an enormous red house for nothing. We're talking about 20,000 Danish crowns, and we still have this house. And of course, I think it's a combination of being very fond of Swedish filmmakers and the nature over there. You know, suddenly having the opportunity to shoot in a completely different environment. It's very poetic. It's with rocks. We don't have a rock in Denmark. What is a rock? And that's why that a lot of Danish filmmakers actually use Swedish actors in their films. My first film where I experienced Swedish actor was Emma's Shadow, where Börje Ahlstedt, who is in my newest film that's shown here, actually is appearing 25 years after. But it was a great experience to drag a Swedish actor into these, let me call it, quite sloppy actors at that time. We're back in the 80s now. Danish actors have become with new generations, of being much more sharp, much more into what they are doing, much more non-theatrically, so to speak. That's why you can never hear what they are saying, because they're all whispering. But they are very much true to watch and in what they are doing. So they learned a lot from the Swedes. And I'll tell you, we'll all be beaten by the Norwegians. And that's why I think it's a funny story, because it's a very strong film nation today, the Norwegian. There's still loads of wonderful Swedish filmmakers and Swedish films made. And I think over a period, we were actually at the top, very close to the top of Scandinavian filmmaking. And I think it was maybe, it topped with a dogma wave, so to speak, internationally. But we all, and that's not because I'm here, there's not a Scandinavian country that do not admire what's happening on Iceland. That this little country, with half the population out of Aarhus in Denmark, makes I don't know how many films a year. And that's why there's this funny story, saying that if you take 2 Finns, 2 Danes, 2 Norwegians, 2 Swedes, and 2 Icelandic people and put them on a desert island, You know that the Finns will start stabbing each other within an hour? After 2 hours, the Swedes have made a church. After 3 hours, the Norwegians start to make their own liquor. And after 4 hours, the Danes make a party. And after 5 hours, the Icelandic people have made a feature film about it all.
Thank you. We will get back to the dogma movement, but first there's Gummitarsan. I was looking through an old Icelandic paper from 1983, as I do every evening, and I saw at the same page they were advertising a play about Gummitarsan and your film about Gummitarsan, and so there was a considerable Gummitarsan craze here, and of course the book by Ole Lund Kirkegaard. So can you tell us a little about that? And was there also a Gummitarsan craze in Denmark at the time?
I think there was. We're now back in the 80s, and I've done You Want to See My Beautiful Navel, and nobody believed in it at that time. And actually I had my own doubts, but it had an enormous audience, and you're not better than your last film. So I started, to have calls from different production companies, and there was this book, Gummitarsan. And it was, and we started to have a lot of money to do children's films. So I was offered that book, and I didn't like it at all. So I actually sent it back because I found it very. It's about this little boy meeting a witch, living in a camping wagon in a suburban of some city, and there's one genius thing about it, because he's mobbed all the time, and then he see this witch, and she gives him a wish. And he's saying that he wish that all his wishes come true, which I find very intelligent. But I couldn't see it, with this witch and this camping wagon. So I sent it back. I had a call from the production company, and the only reason was actually because I've done You Want to See My Beautiful Navel, and I say if I can rewrite it to make it more filmic, I will definitely do it. And I had free hands to do whatever I did. And you have to be aware of that in that competition in these days, you had to compete with Star Wars. There was Star Wars in one cinema, and then you should have a film about a little guy in a camping wagon. I couldn't have it. So that's why I rewrote it. And I rewrote it into something which was very close to my heart, namely from my blacksmith background. I loved big machines. I loved the smell of oil. So in all my films, that I have always some big company, a lot of iron and things like that. And from the window where I was living, I could see these container machines in the background, like these tiny machines moving around with enormous Lego bricks, right? And I said, this is the environment to put this little person who have this idiotic father who says that he's going to be as strong as Tarzan. So I found, I'll show you a bit of it. And this is actually what I've dreamt of all my life as a documentary, is to make a symphony for heavy entrepreneur material, And this is the sequence. Let's just view a bit of it. But it's not in the book. 27,800 kilos.
Hold fast! Hold fast! Hold fast dernede! Rigtig klog, knæk. Tror du, det er en badeanstalt?
Jeg har da ikke gjort noget.
Nej, men hvad er det? Det er fyldt med skidt og lort. Ej.
Jeg sidder da bare der.
Ja, det er godt med dig. Nu må du se at komme op. Jeg bliver sgu helt forskrækket. Man kan jo drukne af den slags. Hvad laver du her? Du må sgu ikke lege her.
Jeg skal hjem nu.
Ja, du skal hjem. Du skal først have noget tørt klodspurt. Så får du...
This was just to give you a taste about, the exotism. We don't have very exotic environments in Denmark, so you have to create it. So you have to find spectacular places to shoot your film. And how I managed to get into this area to shoot a children film, because it's very, very dangerous with these machines weighing 48 tons. And Otto Brandenburg, who is playing the good guy, actually the substitute for the witch in the book, was a heavily drinking man. Lovely person. I did several films. He died years ago. And he had to steer this. I mean, he had to maneuver with this enormous machine, right? And he didn't have a driver's license. He lost that years ago. And this happened with these 48 tons big machines, that when you turn the steering wheel to the right, it goes left. So sitting with a film crew 12 meters up on top, with water down there, and a little boy and this actor, I mean, I could never have done it today. And when he came with his hangovers, I mean, it was so dangerous in between. But I'm very happy we did it, and I'm very happy that we had the possibility to be in that environment, because the way a film is made have always been a top issue for me. Of course, the words that's being said, but how to shoot it the right way, and how to do it spectacular, and how to do it to find the counterpounds in it. Little boy, big machine, and so forth and so on. But this was my second film, and I was very lucky because it won as the best film in Denmark. And again, you're not better than your latest film. So that's where my fortune actually as a filmmaker was made. Because from then on, I could pick and choose. And then I made a sloppy movie as number 3. So that's how it is.
In some ways, this almost feels like a story of my life, for my generation even. I had a school bag just like Gummitarsan. But then you enter your teenage years and you run into Søren Kragh-Jacobsen yet again before you are done with the Icelandic education system. This time a teenage film called Drengene fra St. Petri, which we read the book and I think watched the movie in school here. There are a lot of actors in it who later became famous in Denmark and New Zealand, Nicholas Lee Kaas. So can you... And you later discovered other actors, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your discovering of actors in that too.
I happen to be very lucky with choosing my amateurs. I did, in the beginning, I was employed in Danish television as in the youth, children and youth department. And that's why, of course, I worked a lot with children. And at that time, I had kids on my own, and it was very inspiring. Choosing a little boy or girl in the main part of a film, which I did with The Island on Bird Street, I did it with Gummitarsan, I did it with Emma's Shadow, is for me very exciting to find a child who could actually act up to the biggest actors. And I have to admit that sometimes I filmed 8,000 kids. That happened when we did Emma's Shadow. And with Gummitarsan, I think we test filmed around 3,000-4,000 boys. And some of them were much better actors than this little guy who was 7 years old. But he was like eating the emulsion of the film. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes away from him. There came this little boy one day, because I was actually into finding a 10 years old. But I ended up with him. And that's the way I had it with all my amateurs. So when I was suddenly offered in the late 80s, actually in 89, because it should be the 50 years anniversary of Second World War breakout, and we were supposed to do a film about the first resistance movement. I definitely wanted to have professional actors, because it was heavy parts that these 7, 8 guys should play. But I didn't find the innocence in their eyes, when I test filmed these. I mean, a professional actor coming out of acting school is more or less 26, 27. I could have done what Peter Weir did later when he made, what is it called, the boarding school filmed. What? Peter Weir's film about, boarding school. Everybody knows it. Yeah. No, it's not The Hanging Rock. It's Dead Poets Society. But because he chose actually professional actors, and maybe I should have done that, but I didn't. I chose to go out and find amateurs, and I was very lucky because several of them are actors today. And Nikolai Lee Kås is international acting now, and he's very good, and he's lead in a lot of series and new films, and had a tremendous career. But I was very lucky with these guys. And if I should talk about it just for a second, because it was should have been shot in Denmark. And there's a train sabotage. But I couldn't find steam trains. I could find one steam train that could run. And there was electric wires over all the what is it called? The railways. So what to do? And then I remembered my school time in the good old East, living in Prague, and I said, why not go to Czechoslovakia or Poland? And actually we went to Poland, and my DOP, Dan Lausten, I worked a lot with, and I took a trip to Poland. And I remember we took the ferry to Stettin, in the northern part of Poland, and we took the car into the country, and suddenly there was this, the road was closed, and here came an enormous steam train. And we were going to make a film taking part in 1942. And there was this steam train, and there was these wagons, and there was a lot of people in it. And it was in 1990. And he said the famous words, if we give them, what did he say? If we give them some modern clothes on, they could look like 1942. Because they were actually dressed like they were from 1930. So we decided to do a lot of it in Poland. And we did The Boys from St. Petri in Wrocław, and we shot several places in Poland, in a city called Wolsztyn, where there was loads of trains. And I want to show you a bit of that in a second, where I was actually suddenly like, a kid in a candy store, because there was a lot of electric wires in Poland as well. But we wanted to look right, and there was one interpreter in our crew who actually said, but my grandfather works with the railway in a place called Wolsztyn. And I took to this place, and I saw these 4 or 5 big trains, and a remise, or what it's called, where you store up the trains at night. And and he spoke German, and I went in and I spoke to him, and I said, do you think I could shoot here for a week? It's a big shootout. And he said, yes, of course you could come here. And I said, could I have trains and paint them like Danish trains in 1942? Yes. How many do you want? And I was shooting very high, so I said 6. I want 6 trains. And I said, that's a big problem. And I said, why? He said, I don't know where to put the 27 rest. So at night shooting there, you could stand, and I had 7 steam trains running in front of me. And very smoothly, train after train came in, But I couldn't change the camera. I couldn't shoot down there, because we called in all the cranes from the southern Poland, all the fire equipments we could get to light this thing up. And working with amateurs as a director, it's not like working with professionals. You really have to be on their tail all the time. It's like a football team. You have to get them up in gear, you know, make them ventilate, just to get up and, you know, being afraid, because the freedom fighters in Denmark during the war was shitting in their pants of fright. And these guys should be into this. And, you know, I was coaching them. We were rehearsing lines. We were all these things, you know. And then the DOP said the light is wrong. And we knew we have to wait another hour. And then there was something wrong with the sound. And then there was, you know, there was a lot of new equipment being introduced in these days who actually speeded our job down. And who was a very, very, very big rock around our feet to work. I said, come on, do you have to change the light? Let's shooting in this right. They're ready now. I mean, the audience don't give a shit about your life if they're not good actors. And then I met with Lars von Trier, who I've known since he was in film school. He was shooting Europa in Poland, and we met one day, and he said to me, he looked at me and he said, aren't you tired of heavy techniques on film? And, you know, he really hit the button, because immediately I said, I'm so tired. I'm working with amateurs. I have to wait and wait and wait. And they introduce flags, you know, to chop the light, and new microphones. And I think it's a nightmare, because I work with these guys, and then they know after waiting 1-2 hours, there's nothing more left in them to do it. He said, one day we will do something else. And I'll come back to that. But that's the first time I knew that Lars, with his genius mind, had something, you know, had figured something out. But let's see the sequence with all the trains.
Prøv lige, Lars.
So, it's the mid-90s, you're a young man of 20, you've finished the mandatory viewing of Søren Kragh-Jacobsen films in the Icelandic school system. But you're going to the cinema a lot, you have a growing interest in cinema, and then Søren Kragh-Jacobsen shows up again with one of his best-known and best films, with Mifunes Sistesang and the Dogma movement, which was also your international breakthrough, but yes, you left us on a cliffhanger then as to how Lars von Trier called you up and said, let's do something different.
You know, it's actually so that the boys from St. Petri was quite successful, and you know, when you're successful in one genre, you'll be immediately be asked to do something in the same genre, which is actually very boring. So I've had to admit that I became a Nazi director. I was offered a lot of Second World War projects, and I actually refused a lot until there was on my table landed a book called The Island on Bird Street, which was actually, you who have seen The Piano, it's more or less the same story, but just with a boy. Boy left alone in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I couldn't resist that. And but just before I've said yes to that, Lars von Trier phoned me one day and said, "Do you want to join my Dogma Brotherhood?" And I said, "What's that about?" And he said, "It's about doing very, very cheap films with no equipment." And I must say, I immediately said that as long as there's film in the camera, I'm in. And we met. Thomas Winterberg and I and Lars was sitting in his office, and we actually had to nearly mix blood, because that's the way Lars wanted it. And we decided to have Christian Levering in as number 4, and we formed that brotherhood. And we were supposed to raise, I think it was 16 million Danish crowns to make 4 films. And when I left for Poland to shoot The Island on Bird Street, we had a no-go from the Film Institute. They say, but we can't just handle money out. We have to have consultant, script doctors, blah, 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 blah. And I remember we had a meeting with them, and I said, "Have you ever been in the countryside, with these wax sticks who have 10 colors, and then have given it to a kid to play with for 5 minutes, because then they don't have any colors at all. They are brown." And that's actually the way we feel that your system is, because we are going to give the script to you. You take it, you read it. There's a consultant read it. There's script doctors read it. There's more consulate readers. I mean, there's 10 people's opinion before you have a yes. And we don't want any interference in this. And that's where we had a no. And then I went to shoot The Island on Bird Street. And it happened so that the Danish radio went in with these nearly all the money. And when I came back from that shoot, I was actually away from a year. Thomas Winterberg and Lars was shooting their 2 Dogma film. And I've never seen 2 directors so filled with joy. I was out when Lars was shooting, and I was the first to see Thomas Winterberg's Festen. And it was marvelous film, made on very, very little money. And I was being, together with Christian Levering, going to be the second flush, so to speak. We were going to do it next year. And we had this rule that, I don't know if familiar with the Dogma rule, but you have to shoot with available lights. If you don't have lights, move to another place. You don't have to make any sets. You have to find a set, and you don't have to bring props. Actors have their own clothes. You're not allowed to make any things on the film. I mean, you have a cut, and that's it. And don't have to shoot. You always have to connect sound with what you have on film. And then, which I found very intriguing, no credits. You're not supposed to be there as a director. The film is not ending with directed by. And these 2 assholes, Lars and Thomas, 4 months later, they were standing in Cannes on the stage. And we had a deal. I said, "What is this about? Thomas, we should have all our 4 films out, and people could immediately see who did what. I mean, because we all have different styles." "Yes, but you can't say no to Cannes, and blah, blah, blah." Christian and I was very angry, and we said, "Okay, you're assholes, but okay, we will do it." And I have in many ways been in hell with The Island on Bird Street, which was a film that really kicked back. I was very sick during the production. We filmed in Poland, and it was extremely cold and very, very smoggy. You couldn't actually breathe, and with a little boy, and a lot of people being ill during the production. And we moved to Germany to finish it there, and it was all the time breaking. Had a threat that we didn't have any money. We were involved with the Americans. Never do that, because they never came up with their money. And Sinerand in Germany, where I had my equipment, phoned every day and say, we are taking your equipment tomorrow. So it was really nerve-wracking to do this film. And I came home and I saw these two guys shining, and then see them on the stage in Cannes. And then I wanted to do something. And I decided to go a completely different way, because everybody said it must be very hard to come after Thomas and Lars, which it of course was. But I said, I want to write a fantastic love story. And I want to work with all the most beautiful actresses in Denmark. And I want to bring them in the countryside with me. And I was back to You Want to See My Beautiful Navel. And I had the most fabulous shoot in my life, because you had to do this film in 240 hours. And you have to do it, of course, handheld. It was not new to me. And I was very lucky to find the right actress, Iben Hjejle, who hadn't done anything before. She was very new. And it was one of these productions, where everything was coming your way. It was raining when we want rain. It was sunny when we had sun. I went down to Lolland, which is the only place in Denmark where there never were a film crew, because it's so racked down, so nobody wants to come there. And they were very, very sweet, because they never saw a film crew before. And I was there on a research, and I had this synopsis for Mifune. And I knew that there was this guy, hiding his identity, and now living a commercial director of life in Copenhagen, and having this in his backyard, and his brother, who was what do you call it? Debil, he had a. Yeah, he was. What is it called when you're? He's not an idiot, but he's retarded. And then his father is dying the day he's marrying the daughter of the owner of the company he's working in, and he has to go back, and he has to lie and all this, and he wants to hire a nurse or a housekeeper to take care of this brother, and in by the door comes another one who has something in the closet, namely the former hawker, played by Iben Hjejle, and then the love story is on tracks. And it should be, in my opinion, it should be very glossy. And it was Anthony Dodd Mantle who shot it, who later won an Oscar for his Mumbai film, I think it's called. Wonderful DOP. We shot it handheld. But coming down there, trying to find a house where there was these things I have to use, was again, a gift, because they said, do you have any empty farms? And they said, do the Pope have a funny hat? Ask the fire department, because they're burning them down, because they're sending all troubled people down here to live in our empty farms. So I saw 27 empty farms, and they were filled with furniture, rats, old car wrecks. It was an El Dorado for a filmmaker to shoot there. And I said, and I picked and chose one farm. And this was just before Christmas. I have to do this in late May. And when I went home, I heard in the radio that Toshiro Mifune was dead. And Toshiro Mifune, who was one of my heroes, the Japanese actors in Seven Samurais, Kurosawa's masterpiece. I've seen a lot of films with Kurosawa. And I said, why? I want to pay a tribute to my old, most beloved actor. And I knew there was, I've written in my script that there was this game he had with his brother. There was somebody hidden in the closet and blah, blah, blah. And I said, of course, my main character has been as fond as Toshiro Mifune as I have been. Went to the local cinema, I've seen all Kurosawa's movies, and he's of course playing the Seven Samurai down in the basement to scare his brother. So that's why, the Mifune thing came into it. And sometime when you pick a title, it's in Danish called Mifunes Last Song. like a hymn to Toshiro Mifune. And Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg said, "You're an idiot." I mean, we're called, The Idiots. That's the title of Lars's film. The Party, Festen, is the title of Thomas's. I think we should go very short names. And a title like this. And I said, but I don't think people give a damn about titles if it's a good movie. And so I stick to my title. And we start to shoot, when we wrote the script, and I wrote the first script, and then I took in Anders Thomas Jensen, who I've worked with several times since, lovely, fantastic filmmaker and screenwriter. And we start to shoot in May, with all these actors showing up in their own costumes, just bringing them down in cars, installing them on some farms, shooting every day, shooting 8-hour days, very strict rules because we didn't have any money. And I decided to have music on my film. So I hired all the musician friends I knew, and I think that every filmmaker should experience to stand in the turnip field 5 o'clock in the morning with a harmonium player in the background playing to what you're shooting. Because I said to these musicians, I'll give you 3 shots. I'll do it 6 times. And if I can cut it, if you're in the right place at the right time, I can use it. And I don't mind if it's scrambling a bit, but there should be some reason in it. And I have had a lot of musicians. Some of it I used, some of it I didn't. I had Carl Bille, one of the boys from St. Petri, who was actually playing on a water pipe. And he's the one who's doing the Japanese sounds. And he smoked a lot of very good stuff. And sometimes, he just slept, And I said, "Where the fuck, where were you?" I mean, we just, okay, I'll blow a bit in the next take. But it was wonderful to do the film. And of course it was much more wonderful that everybody wants to have them, that I don't know why we created a wave, because that was definitely not the intention. The intention was to make joyful films. And, we said, what can we call it? And we talked a lot about, it's like going on a cure. And I kept saying, because as being a musician on the side, and I still play concerts in Denmark. And I said, but come on, Lars, you had this idea from the Unplugged movement in the beginning of the 90s. Where you could see in MTV, all these guys playing Unplugged, which I understood completely because all the overdubs was now introduced. So it is actually like playing acoustic, just with films. And it is joyful. And of course there's a lot of obstacles. But it shows that when you do a film like this, all the obstacles actually sometimes turn into be an advantage for you. Because we couldn't, there's no light, okay, let's move it out. And sometimes you have gifts with the light, with God's own light and things like that. So for me, it was a wonderful experience. And I will say I'm much more prepared to do a dogma film today, because it was lovely. And of course it was lovely because people want to see them. And we came all over the world with them, which is another story. But I would like to show you this clip, and then I think I've been talking wall to wall, but I hope there's some questions.
Fordi det skal du bare.
Nu op,
Kom her. Mifune! Kan du huske Mifune? Hvad? Kan du? Kan du? Ja, Mifune. Kan du huske Mifune? Ja. Mifune? Skal vi festen overhovedet finde Mifune? Kan vi det? Kom. Jeg siger, Mifune er hjemme. Kan du huske ham? Hvad? Hvad siger du, Mifune? Husk, han er hernede. Afrud.
Mifune! Så siger du Mifune!
Mifune! Ujimo! Rud, han er her. Mifune! Du store, sure, hyvende samurai. Hvor er du? Mifune, kom så her. Kom og lege med Rud. Kom her. Rud, kom nu! Sådan er det! Øj, til mig! Sådan er det! Øj, kom så! Rud, stop af! Øj, kom nu! Sådan er det! Øj, flæk, Rud! Flæk! Øj, skål af mig! Flæk, Rud!
Hallo? Hallo?
Åh, sådan! Gå, øj, øj!
Liva Silander.
Hej.
Jeg har mine anbefalinger med.
Nå, ja. Christian Jensen. Ja, eller det var sådan en leg, jeg leger med min bror, hvor han var lige før. Så.
I want to see it again. I just did, but just to continue with my life in Søren Kragh-Jacobsen. It's 2000 and something. You're entering middle age. You no longer go out so much, but you turn on the TV, and there's something by Søren Kragh-Jacobsen called Erdnen and Borgen, two of the most popular TV series. We actually have an actress from Erdnen in the audience, or did she go? Oh. But you were actually the one who got, you know, Erdnen, it's about the half Icelandic policeman in Copenhagen. But Borgen, you actually got that started, didn't you?
Living as a filmmaker, I've made 11 feature films, but you know, when I've done it so many years, you know, you can't live off doing 11 feature films. So you have to keep the knife sharp, so to speak. So I made a lot of television in between, and when the long-running series started back in the 90s, they wanted filmmakers to make it. You know, not heavily employed in Denmark's radio. And I must say, over the years, it has been marvelous to have the opportunity to come in and make 2 episodes, to be episode directors, because you don't have any risk. You just have to do it as good as all the rest. And you have a script, you have 3 weeks preparation, you have actors who actually know their parts, and it's running. And you know, I made, I don't know if Ørnen have been here, it's actually supposed to take place in Iceland, some of it, right? And I was the one who did all the episodes who was taking place in Berlin. So it was a way for me to do what I've used to do, and to make some money, and to meet a lot of actors and things like that. And I was asked, when it came to Borgen, which is 3 years ago, if I wanted to concept it, which means start it up, because that's of course the difficult part. It's like doing a feature film, and you have 10 months to do it. You have to find the actors, you have to create the universe, you have to find the tone, you have to make it live, and you have to sell the first 3 episodes to a big audience. And of course you then have all the nerves back again. But it was, of course, it was fun to make that. I mean, the biggest struggle was that the main character, which is Birgitte Nyborg, who's the Minister of State, was an actor who was actually a a comedian by that time. It's not so that Sisse Babette didn't have played other things, but she was mainly known as a comedian at that time. She's very, very funny. And I really have to fight and convince the rest of the people in that big house, you know, where there was a lot of hats who could make decisions. But I'm very, very pleased that I chose her. And because I said, but she's very charming, she's a comedian, but I mean, who wouldn't want a politician being a comedian? I mean, who could be funny and so forth and so on. I'm sure you had, you know, and they had a Beppe Drillo in Italy. But, you know, she should hide it, of course, and she was very good. And the main thing, you know, which is amazing, which is funny, is that I said to them, why do I have such little money per minute? I have much less than when we did the other series. And they said, because this is a series that cannot travel. I think we can sell it to Sweden because they have more or less the same system as we have and Norway and Iceland, and that's it. And it was not true, because now it's sold to 87 countries, which my wallet is very happy about, I will say. And that's so I was starting this up, and I don't know. We have very good writers, so it's absolutely very much due to Adam Prise, who is the writer of it, that he saw that doing a film about the toolbox of the democracy is important. And I will say that to every filmmaker, you know, when asked, because that was my argument when I applied for more money, I said, but why don't you ask directors before you set a budget? Because the most difficult thing for a director is two people in a naked room. Because there's nothing to hide behind. I mean, there's just the words. And here they are playing politics, and it's supposed to be serious. But it was fun to do it, and I'm very pleased that it's doing so well.
We have time for a couple of questions from the audience.
I said it all. I will do it try to do it very short. A professional actor has learned her or his métier on a school. And they have a lot of methods. They have things, they have buttons that they can use that an amateur can't use. And I think it's very obvious in the film I'm bringing here to the festival called The Hour of the Lynx, that the boy, the 20-year-old guy, he's an amateur. He didn't do very much. And he was struggling. I mean, he was using every inch of himself doing what he had to do. And at the end of the day, several times he broke down. And a professional actor very rarely, I think, will do that. They will go in, use their methods, and they'll spend an evening reading on the script, preparing them for the next day. So they don't have method. That's why it's much harder for an amateur, I think. That's my experience. It's okay?
Yes.
I couldn't say yes or no, but you know, finding the plot, because I didn't have a story. I knew that when Lars von Trier started up the Dogma movement, he told us immediately what he wanted to do. He wanted to do The Idiots. And you know, of course we envied him, and we talked a lot. Thomas Vinterberg said, what the fuck am I doing? Where do I find my story? So we didn't have a story. And when it came to me that I wanted to do Mifune, and I had to set these 4 characters up and make this film, Fish Out of Water, I found it intriguing to have a retarded. So maybe I was influenced by Lars. But, meeting Jesper Asholt, who's playing it, and, he gave me some, he was performing a bit for me. I said this could be fantastic, just to have him playing retarded. And I will, end your question with one funny story. I was invited to the Seoul Film Festival. And they asked, could you bring one of your actors? And I sent back, or my company sent back, that I would bring Rud from the film. And we have a letter back saying, we are very sorry, Mr. Jacobsen, but we don't have personnel to take care of a retarded person during our festival. And this telegram Jesper Asholt has on have pinned it up at home, And of course you have. No. Yes. This is film, And we had a lot of arguments. We were very, very heavily fighting because, we had this agreement that it was, should be shot in this television format on film. And Lars and Thomas, changed their mind and shot it on 3 small Sony cameras. And I said, come on, it was not the deal that you should move around with 3 cameras. So I went back and stick to film and camera, which Anthony Mandel found was suitable or was funny to do, right? And not a lot of movement. We got seasick of seeing all the other things. But it's done on film, 16.
So, yeah, maybe one last question. Isolde?
Could you give me that again? The more experience you have, definitely not. Yes, of course. I think the more knowledge you have, the more difficult it gets. Because in the old days, you just take a camera and you just shoot, which I think is fantastic. It's lovely, We take it from here, we take it from here. Okay, you just said that and things like that. The more experienced you get, the more options you have, the more ways you have tried. I think it gets worse, I must say. And then there's one thing about filmmaking in 2012, 13 is that we have half the time to do it. We have fabulous cameras. I've just shot one feature film on an Alexa, the new one. But it's a fantastic experience to do it because you can shoot actually you could shoot this and make it look like daylight. You couldn't do that in the old days. So there's a lot of things that become easier. But knowing so much about how to do it, I think much more about it. But I must say that actually I hate to start a film up. I love to be shooting a film. I don't particularly like the editing room. I love the sound. And that's have been following me my whole life. Because in the editing room you're discovering all your mistakes. And at the end you see the shit fly, so to speak. But I'll say, very short, I don't think it gets easier to have at the end of a long career, which I'm getting close to. But it's still funny. I did it with my Smoking Naule, and it's an all right score, And the at this time in the youth wave, there should be songs. I hate songs in films. I never had a song in a film before and after, and I decided never to do it again because I was sure that a new person coming in and viewing the film would bring something extra to it. Now we did what we have to do, right? And I think there's a close connection between being playing music and making films. And set very short, either it swings or it don't. I mean, it's the same with a film and a piece of music. And I have a lot of joy playing. I'm doing 12 concerts a year, and I'm continuing. I have a wonderful band, and of course, it's not the money, it's the fun. And but you know, and I'm still writing things, and still once in a while making a record. But I think it's close to connected. And writing lyrics, when you're sitting with a film script and you sort of, so to speak, hit the wall. You know, these days where nothing happens, you can't break that scene. It's good to write very short lyrics, and if you can use that in a song. But I think there's a close connection. I think it's a lot to do with music, pace.
So I think we're gonna have to stop here, but you can see the Hour of the Links, the Lossens Time, today at 4 o'clock, and you'll be answering more questions after that screening. And there's another chance to see that on Monday at 11:30 in the evening. So maybe we'll see you later today at after Søren Kragh's latest film. So thank you very much for coming, and thank all of you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.